All right, welcome back to the InvestTalk channel. And every day on InvestTalk, we answer listener questions. And so we figured Steve and I would do a few right now. We've asked them through our Instagram channel, and I'm going to read off a few and we can go from there. Now, the first one, which I think is great, which is, where's Steve?
I'm here. I'm still here.
You're still there.
Remember, I'm now 70, Justin.
Yes.
And and I've talked about it. I said when I reach 70, I'd like to take some time off, and do the things that I should have been doing, probably when I was 65.
Yeah.
Retirement. But I'm still here. I'm still around, and I'm always, talking to you. And it's just that maybe I'm not as around as I used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're like you said, taking some time off, and I think it was what happened. We took a photo shoot, and you weren't in the photo shoot. We replaced you with my dog Kobe. So I hope you're okay with that.
Better looking than me, yeah. I'm okay with that for sure. Kobe's a nice looking dog.
I hope that answered the question. There you go. He is. Now the next one would be, what advice do you have for beginners? I think this is a great one. We kind of get this all the time because we get new listeners to InvestTalk, daily.
Well, I think, Justin, if a beginner, if they can just get into the habit of putting money aside on every paycheck, they don't have to put a lot. I'm thinking, even if you can just 5%.
Yeah. Okay.
And then when you get a raise, maybe bump it up to 10%.
Yeah. I love that. We talk about investing on InvestTalk naturally, but you can't invest unless you're saving, and the habit of saving. This is why 401ks are the best avenue for people to build wealth and build retirement assets over time. Why? Because it's automatic savings. They never see it in their bank account. And so it's a great avenue for that. But that doesn't mean that you can't save elsewhere as well. It just takes a little more discipline, right?
It just takes discipline. Yeah. And again, it's the habit. Just get into that habit. If you start young, you'll be wealthy by the time you retire.
Yeah. And then, when it comes to learning about investing, is reading a lot, right? And I think starting small, a lot of people try to jump in with 2 feet, right? But you don't need a lot of money to get started. Even if you have $50,000, doesn't mean you have to invest $50,000.
Yeah, don't start with reading The Wealth of Nations. Yeah, it's books this thick, and
we have a suite of books on our website that you can go and see to look at and to read and get a good primer on how to be a successful investor.
Start with the fundamentals, not the technicals. The fundamentals is what you want to start with.
Exactly. So it's really about consistently learning. Take baby steps. You don't need to jump in to the deep end right away. In fact, you're probably going to get burned if you do that. So if you get burned when you're only playing with a small dollar amount, then you can, then you can avoid major step backs.
Yeah, there's a learning curve.
There's a learning curve, and understand that and be patient with what you're doing. Okay. Now, the next question would be, what other resources do you have other than the newsletter? Well, I think simply, newsletter is great. Comes out weekly. We write it. There's a stock idea section. There's an overview of the markets, portfolio management, and more of a personal finance section as well. But there's also office hours. I do that every Wednesday at noon. I'm going to go over the market and do a Q&A. I think that's a great resource. But also InvestTalk Academy, where Steve and I have done lessons throughout the years. We recorded them, and it's a library of lessons on 10 different broad topics, and we have different lessons on each.
I think the most current and most interesting for most people is to just listen to us live, because we're talking about current events now. And I think many people, the longer you listen, the more you'll learn.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you'll learn not just the things that we say, but what listeners say and the pitfalls that they bring. We talk about things that are on our mind, but at the end of the day, it's really about our listeners and the questions that they bring, like these, and those are the most instructive, I think, for our other listeners.
Yeah, and don't think we don't make mistakes. Yeah. We've made our past mistakes, so I think it's a great learning environment for everybody.
Exactly. All right, now the next one will be. Take a look here. Given what's happening in the commercial real estate market, should I be invested in REITs?
I would be very careful with REITs right now. There is a big, big problem. And it's very simple to observe. You can start with COVID. What happened after COVID? Everybody started working from home, right? So remember, everybody was coming to the office, or a lot. We already had a phenomena going on where people were working more and more from home. Okay.
Now it's accelerated.
COVID accelerated that. Okay. Now that means these office buildings, a lot of them are half empty half the time. And now interest rates have risen, and real estate loans are very different than 30-year mortgage loans on your house.
Yeah, balloon payments.
That's right.
Yeah.
So now they have payments coming due, or they got to refinance it at a much higher interest rate. I think REITs are I'm not saying you never invest in any REITs, but you got to be really careful.
Well, I think this goes back to painting an entire sector with one broad stroke, right? There are different subsectors in the REIT space, right? There's office REITs is kind of what you're talking about, but there are industrial REITs, there are medical REITs. But sometimes people think medical REIT and they think that's safe just because it's medical. That's not necessarily true. They have challenges, just like
they borrow money, they buy buildings.
There's leverage there, so REITs can be good, but you really have to dig into the fundamentals of the assets that they own, because that's really what it is. You're buying a suite of assets, a suite of real estate assets that produce income.
Don't fall in love with that. Don't fall in love with the dividend they're paying. Yeah, because you don't know how sustainable that is going forward. Again, don't look in the rearview mirror, look in the windshield, look forward, not backwards.
Yeah, I think that the biggest issue was going to be the private REITs, because you don't really know exactly what they're invested in. The public REITs are a lot more transparent, and it's easier to find ones that are focused in areas that don't have that secular headwind, right?
If I was to make a flat statement, Justin, it would be, don't invest in private REITs, because you can't find out what they're doing. You don't know what the general partner's doing with the money.
Exactly.
You don't.
All right. The next one is going to be, interest rates have gone up a lot over the past year. What are your thoughts on consumer debt levels? Consumer debt levels. Do you think that the consumer can handle these higher rates?
I haven't seen, and maybe you'd have, but I haven't seen what the consumer has gotten. They are in debt. We all know that, right? That's not an issue. But have they got to a point where they can't afford that debt?
From what I've seen, not really, because a lot of their debt, most of their debt is in mortgages. Right? And mortgage debt is fixed, right?
And they refinanced it way down.
Yeah, they're typically rate locked at 3%, so their carrying cost for their home is very, very low. Yeah. Yes, credit card debt is rising, but incomes are also rising as well. So I don't think that is something that's going to derail the economy now.
I think the question before with commercial real estate and REITs is more of a catalyst for danger of our economy.
Yes, I agree. Now, the next one is, what are your thoughts on the housing market, right? That kind of feeds into what we've been talking about.
We have very low inventory. I don't see it as a problem right now. I just don't.
Yeah, I think this is an environment where so many people have PTSD from 2008. They think you go into a recession, the R word, the dreaded R word, and you're suddenly going to have some sort of housing collapse. But it goes back to understanding the fundamentals. And the fundamentals within the housing market are, the inventory remains low. People are rate locked. They're not going to sell their home and trade in a 3% mortgage for a 7% mortgage. That's why the home builders are now over 30% of sales, when they're typically in the low teens, right? Because they're the marginal inventory that's coming on. So
I don't see a housing collapse. I don't see that.
I see a slow, controlled kind of correction in prices, but not an 08, 40, 50, 60% drop.
Not like 08, where certain areas did drop 50%.
Yeah, because back then it was about jingle mail. Remember, you mail in the keys, jingle mail, and people are walking away from their mortgages. But now people want those mortgages because they're locked into that 3% rate. And so I don't see it really being a problem.
I don't either.
All right, now the last one is going to be thoughts on deglobalization, and we've talked about this a lot. The COVID was a sea change in work from home and in the REIT sector, the office REIT sector. But from a global supply chain standpoint, it also kind of shed light on how fragile our supply chains
put a spotlight on where you're dependent on. For us, remember, it was masks and things that were produced all in China, and we couldn't get them. So I think we are going to see a continually change in the globalization to be bringing back much of the manufacturing, or a good chunk of it, back here to the U.S. I think that's a trend that will probably continue for,
or just regionalized. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the U.S., but maybe Canada, maybe Mexico, maybe even other Asian countries that have political
Again, diversification.
environments. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Not having one supplier of important goods that you're producing, having multiple that you can lean on, ramp up here if needed, ramp down here if needed. So I think deglobalization is certainly a trend, but it's a slow one. It's something that's going to take decades, probably not 1 or 2 years.
Exactly. It's going to take a long time. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
It's just not.
Well, these have been some great questions from our listeners, and we get them all the time on our podcast, InvestTalk. And if you want to hear more, just head over to your favorite podcast network and subscribe.